we're actually talking about digital platform for the masses. It's a fairly broad topic. As you can see, we have a fairly distinctive group of panelists with me here. And in fact, Richard and I have known each other for a while. We've never imagined that you and I would sit in a neuroscience-related event, right? 10 years ago.
Not back then.
So things really have changed. What we should do first is, I'll give a chance for each of you to sort of introduce yourself, and your company, what do you do there, so that, people can get familiar with your background. Why don't we start with you, Stefano?
So my name is Stefano Baldassi, and I work for Meta Company.
Yes.
Out of Redwood Shores, local company. We do augmented reality headsets. There are optical see-through and gesture controlled. And I am the director of neuroscience and analytics. This is the new name of my department. Mm-hmm. And my background is actually academic, visual neuroscience for 15 plus years before I joined Meta for this fantastic enterprise in nailing augmented reality for the masses.
Terrific.
My name's Richard Marks. I work for PlayStation. I run a group called Magic Lab, and we take new technologies and figure out, kind of look through the lens of PlayStation why those new technologies might matter to our company, and we rapidly prototype experiences based on those technologies. Right now, VR is one of the big areas that our company is interested in. We have a booth outside where we're showing PlayStation VR. We have a couple units, and my group works on some of the earlier things in VR, and especially in the user interface side of things.
Interesting.
Thanks. My name is Jim Margraf. I'm CEO and founder, chairman of iFluence, and I have a background in user experience and product design. I created a device called a Leap Pad to teach children to read. I also created a tool called a LiveScribe Smart Pen to help us interact with paper in a different way. And 15 years ago, a neurologist began working with a person with quadriplegia who was locked in. Over the last 15 years, that doctor, Dr. Torch, developed 7 generations of wearable eye tracking technology. I happened to meet him a few years ago, looked at this technology, and deemed it the best in the world that I could find for wearable eye tracking. And since then, we've taken that, we've productized it, made it small, and what we're doing with that is we're enabling people to transform intent into action through your eyes with a new interaction model. It's a lot of fun.
Terrific.
Hi, Brendan Kim with Samsung Global Innovation Center. The Global Innovation Center, or the GIC, basically, our mission is to bring the power of the Samsung platform to startups to help accelerate their growth, while also bringing software and services innovation into Samsung. We do that in a number of different ways. We have a partnerships team, an acquisitions team, our own accelerator incubator, and then we also have an early stage investments team, which I lead. So we lead all the software and services investments for Samsung. We have a particular interest in VR, of course, through our VR devices and our 360 camera. And then on the investment side, we've made a number of investments on the VR side. So a lot of interest and fascination around VR.
Excellent. My name is Xin Cheng. I run Corp Dev for MindMaze. MindMaze is a Swiss-based neurotechnology company. Our background is in creating products for stroke rehabilitation and other neural deficits. My most recent project is based here in San Francisco. It's called Neuro.io. We're just getting started, and we look forward to working on how the intersection of neuroscience technologies and immersive reality. We're calling it neural immersive technology.
Neuro-immersive technology.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Terrific. Thank you very much. As you can see, it's a sorry. As you can see, it's a fairly diverse group of folks here. I will probably start with some of the more industry generic questions, given that start at a higher level, and then later on we'll probably hone more into the human performance and healthcare side of things, if that's okay. Maybe I'll start with Richard, right? Given that we've known each other. What's your view on people talk about VR, AR coming as an industry? What's your view, right? You're at the forefront of a major platform. What's your view in terms of when it's going to reach the mass, right? Because we always talk about core gamers, but when would the regular user start to engage in AR and VR as a product, from your point of view?
Yeah, well, right now it is very much kind of an enthusiast focus because it's the early days of the system. But actually, when we get people to try the experiences we have.
Yes.
People who say, oh, I'm not even a gamer, I don't want to try. Almost all of those people are very excited by the experiences, and kind of it flips a bit where they say now they're actually interested in this space. So
Interesting.
I mean, for sure that the gamers know they're interested already. There's, I mean, a more immersive, more interactive kind of experience. They know they would want to have that. But other people are surprised at how compelling the experiences are. Because they think of it as a video game, but it actually, you know, kind of transcends that in some ways and becomes this kind of human experience thing.
Yeah.
And video games are easy and good kind of start, I think. But definitely the energy that you're seeing in the space is because of there's so many other things it can also do. I think we're happy that we're going to do a great focus on gaming, because that's what we always focus on. But we are, you know, looking around and seeing all the other things too.
Yeah. And are there any thoughts around what sort of conditions need to happen from a technology or user experience side that needs to happen when you know, for the mass to really enjoy this technology? Clearly, it's still.
Well, I think you can already see, maybe if you analyze it, that some of the early headsets are very ugly and very uncomfortable and things. That you can get this amazing experience, but it's a huge cost as far as encumbrance and maybe price. And so, of course, lowering those barriers is a huge thing to get mass adoption. So you have this great experience, but you also have this really big negative. Getting rid of the negatives is actually probably the biggest thing to do first. And making it comfortable, making it easy to access, easy to hook up, those kind of things.
Okay.
So we're focused on that.
You're focused on that, right? Okay, I'll come back to that later. Brandon, maybe from your point, I mean, you're more on the investment side, but you know, you also sort of represent Samsung here. You know, Samsung obviously have also one of the more mass-driven, you know, VR device, Gear VR out there in the market, you know.
Yeah, we've got over a million of those devices out there now. So I think Gear VR.
Sorry, your mic,
No. There it goes.
Is that better?
Yeah,
Not yet.
maybe you can speak
All right,
louder.
I'm not sure what's going on with my mic. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm going to take this off and do this. You know, Samsung Gear VR, we already have about over a million of those devices out there. I think there are different levels of sort of VR experiences that you can have. You can have the completely immersive, the state-of-the-art kind of experiences today with Oculus or PlayStation or something like that, but it's a very costly kind of experience. Or you can have mass adoption at different kinds of experiences, right? Where you have a Gear VR and a phone, a smartphone. You know, Samsung ships over 100 million of those devices that are already VR capable. It's just a question of what kind of experience that you want to deliver on those devices. I think for true mass adoption, you need to get beyond gaming. There's a core gaming community that's going to adopt this. But it has to go beyond gaming, and so into areas like communication, you know, and you know, simple things like capturing memories in VR. So we have there's a company called 8i down in LA, which is you know, using off-the-shelf cameras to capture true volumetric images of people, right? So that you can capture your child as they're growing up, but it's in true 3D, not just 3D sort of 360 video, but true 3D. Volumetric video where you can go around and look around the child.
The Matrix, right? Essentially the Matrix, right?
Yes. It's that kind of thing. I think, and then there's another company down in LA which is pioneering around communication, so that, you know, we always talk about, or there's a lot of talk about VR being sort of a solitary kind of experience. You've got this headset on, you don't see anything else. Well, I've been in situations and demos with these guys where you're in that situation, but you're going up and high-fiving other players, you know, fist bumping, and it becomes a truly kind of a social experience. I think video games too, people would say that a lot of video games are isolating experiences, but I see my kids play, they're talking all the time, right? So, but I do think it has to get beyond some of the core kind of gaming use cases that you have today for it to be really true mass adoption.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that because technology is evolving, I'm sure Richard would agree, and all of us, rapidly, right? You know, with, for example, 8i with the volumetric capture, whatnot. I mean, when these technologies become more prevalent, obviously you can create different experiences and sort of different engagement models for the end user, right? Which may lead to different application and usages, right? So, I mean, how do you keep up with, Richard, how do you keep up with all these different changes in technology and new things going on in the market?
Yeah, well, that's basically my group's job, is to look at these pieces of technology and how they would matter to us. I mean, so we were mentioning my kids actually play online a lot too, and really pretty much they have a controller interface and a voice communication interface for online gaming now. And that's kind of an abstracted controller interface. And I think VR actually, the opportunity is they'll have a lot more expression that they can bring into that connected experience. And I mean, using technologies like Jim's company works on, where you get more input that you can provide and some of the things we're doing with hand tracking and stuff, having that when you're in this kind of virtual space gives you a lot more freedom of expression.
Interesting, interesting. How do people keep up, right? We have to figure out, like, how do we actually keep everyone up to all the latest technology, right, for great applications. I'll shift the conversation a little bit to Meta and MindMaze, right? Obviously, both of you are also making sort of an end-to-end solution, right, or a hardware that, you know, a product that involves the hardware that you're trying to sell both to the consumer, but also to some specific users in certain verticals, right? From your point of view, right, where is it gonna happen? What's it gonna be the trigger for, you know, these sort of products to become popular, right?
Yes, thanks. There is definitely a curve of adoption that will pass, in our opinion, through the knowledge workers and to verticals that currently do not care about specific aspects of the form factor, but more about the performance of the hardware and on the combination between the algorithms that we provide based on the hardware. So very, very important aspects of that will be the field of view, of course. That has been a limitation that we're trying at Meta to overcome with our new product. By having learned from our first product.
Why don't you tell the group a little bit more about your product and what it can do, actually?
We are the first to market in this industry with Meta 1 that was shipped as a developer kit in 2014. And the Meta 1 had a similar array of sensors that we have now, which is the usual cameras, IMU for head tracking, a depth sensor for sensing hands, and for having a depth knowledge of the immediate vicinities to the users. And we were delivering through Moverio optics, a field of view that was ranging between 25 and 30 plus degrees based on some extra device we provided the users. And we learned by having sold out this product to thousands of developers all over the world across verticals, that field of view was the first demand. Not the tethered part that is still necessary on our side to get the developers to develop all the applications at the highest power level that they want, but all the experiential parts, which is field of view, of course, latencies and registrations delivered through fast algorithms. The latency issue is a major issue for scaling this technology to the masses, because in augmented reality, you cannot afford to delay the whole virtual world as you could do as a little trick in a virtual reality, whereas the digital content is perfectly registered to the real world, and you see through it. So it's a non-forgiving technology, and we need to nail it up to the last millisecond.
Interesting.
So this is one of the big things. But from the experiential standpoint, we also know that hands interactions matter a lot. This is where like neuroscience comes strong at Meta, because we know that users, when they have a strong, specially localized 3D content, they want to go and touch that content. They want to go and manipulate that content. And this is our big effort from like the joint effort of our neuroscience team and the computer vision and software team to provide that as reliable as possible.
So Meta, you also have a hand tracking solution.
We do have hand tracking solution that is built in. We got a depth sensor, depth camera that track hands and algorithm to support that. This is our Meta 2 device that was
announced recently,
at TED in February by our CEO, Meron Gribet. And will be launching in Q3 in July. In the first units will be shipped to our customers, and it will deliver a 90 plus degrees field of view, which approaches VR field of view and will provide persistence of the digital content.
Good. I'll come back to you on the use cases a little bit, which I'm sure the audience would like to hear more about. What about yourself, right?
All right, so
Shin, right?
yes,
Sorry,
Shin,
yes.
yeah. So
Yes.
MindMaze, our background in capital equipment, B2B hardware for med tech. It does involve hand tracking. It does involve pass-through AR. But we're moving into the consumer space. And to do so, we understand that there's several things that are happening and converging to make this happen. One is that with VR, there hasn't been a step change as large as display technology as you see in VR since cinema and television. What hasn't kept up, we don't have parity with is input. So when you think about keyboards, mice, multi-touch voice, they pale in comparison to what BCI could be. So that's, right now, we're at the very early stages of that. But we take a very long view of being able to have an input mechanism using neural sensors, biosensors, in such a way that it is natural for the VR and AR experience.
Yeah.
Something that we haven't had in the past is a reason to have an apparatus on your head.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, people say it's like you have a piece of plastic stuck to your face. Well, if you have that piece of plastic stuck to your face, why don't you embed sensors into the face foam, embed sensors into the band, right? So there's any number of these convergences of user experience mechanisms that are making this possible at this time.
I love your point of view around the input as a controller. Still, you see as a potential bottleneck today, right? There's a lot of potential for improvements. I'd like to come back on the technology a little bit because Richard, certainly from your vantage point, you have seen a lot of new technologies around the space. What do you think are the key sort of barriers to truly immersive experience, but also what gets you really excited about the next few years in terms of technology involvement?
Well, I'm very biased because I have focused a lot on input technologies. And I've been at PlayStation for 16 years.
Yeah.
And during those years when I first got there, graphics was ramping up. So the display was like outpacing everything else. And suddenly input was behind. And then we spent a lot of years trying to get input to catch up with different kinds of things. The Wii and things like that were an early play. And what we've done at PlayStation and then Kinect, all those things. And then, now we get to VR. And suddenly VR, it felt like the input was catching up, and now VR made us all jump, again. Now the displays passed us up again, and now input has to catch back up. So
You're right.
it's good because I like input. I like working on input. So, but that's what I think is the big area of opportunity.
You also agree that input is a major area for...
I feel like the display side has very good engineering curves that people already understand. Not even curves, more lines that they know how to follow.
Yes.
But on the input side, there's these steps that have to happen, these kind of big feature changes, and those are much harder to predict.
Interesting.
I
Yes, go ahead.
I think the really interesting thing is, to have a truly immersive experience, every little bit of input that your brain gets just makes up for all the little flaws that you might see.
Yeah.
So when you first put on a headset or HMD, you look around, you start to see the pixelations, you start to see the imperfections. But as soon as you introduce sound, you forget a little bit more about that. As soon as you introduce your hands, you forget even more. When you start to be able to move around in a space, then it's like, wow, I don't really see all the imperfections, because your brain does a great job of filling in some of the details that are missing. But you need more input.
Interesting. So what you're saying is that we actually get more of the sensory input into the experience, your brain becomes more tolerant towards, little
Your brain,
biases
I
in
think,
there.
actually makes up for the imperfections. It just fills it in.
Interesting. Very, 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 very good. Jim, I'd love to get you to step in here, right? Clearly, you're betting yourself also on the core technology that's, that would enhance the experience by a lot, right? Why don't you share some of your point of view in terms of how your technology can kind of reshape some of the experience that users are having today?
Sure. Well, it starts out realizing, first of all, your eyes are the fastest moving organ in your body. They move up to 900 degrees per second. So now when we look at input, we need to take advantage of that and think about the implications. So for instance, when I was working on the Leap Pad and had this controller and was watching children's eyes as they had a stylus and they were moving the stylus around touching, the stylus is slow. The eyes are fast, an order of magnitude faster. So then we look as well at different forms of input, whether it's head motion or speaking or other forms, but the eyes are just super fast.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I looked at this, and a few years ago, began reading, after I acquired this technology, this eye tracking technology, started to look at and read papers on this and say, what can we do to the eyes? What I found was a fundamental collision. All the literature said if you're trying to use your eyes for input, pretty much don't bother. Because your eyes are a great, wonderfully high bandwidth input channel, but as far as controlling things, you're going to hit a philosophical and technical collision. And that is, when you're consuming information, how do you simultaneously direct? So here's a question. Just you and I are looking at each other right now, and we're talking.
Yeah.
Who's consuming, who's directing? We're both doing both.
Exactly.
Which is,
I feel like you're consuming me, but that's okay.
So it's interesting because I looked at that and said, okay, how can we create a dialogue, if you will, with an agent that can be monitoring your eyes in an environment when you have tracking, so you're looking at your eyes move around, and this is intelligent enough to be able to have a dialogue with you. So we start with basically a display with affordances, and the affordances are present for you to see, just like I'm looking at you right now.
Yeah.
Then we can supplement that with and track signals. So now we look at the eye motion, and these can be purposeful signals and non-purposeful signals. So we can look at where your eyes move at times, and other times we look at they're moving and you're not aware of it. Then we follow that up with feedback and say, okay, now what type of feedback can we give? Well, that's actions, but it's also visual transitions.
Yes.
When you package that up, you can do something amazing that we call eye interaction. And until you do that, you're stuck with eye tracking.
Yeah.
Eye tracking says, okay, I can see where the eyes move around. You hand that off to developers. Developers use that for a little while, and they fall prey to two basic approaches. If I were to ask you, if you can track the eyes, what would you do with it? So you look at your tracking, they're moving, and how you're going to let someone, for instance, select an object, navigate through a menu, scroll, pan, zoom, input information. You're using your eyes. How do you do that? Well, what's been done in the past are two basic approaches. I use my eyes, I look, and I dwell. And I stay right there and I wait, which is horribly slow. It's just terrible. Or I look at somebody, I look at an image and a menu, and I wink at it or blink at it, which is equally bad. So you have to find a way now to create a language. And in as much as an interaction model, I think most people know, but consider punch cards and the movement from punch cards to a keyboard, new interaction model, change computing. Then keyboard to a mouse with a GUI, new interaction model. Then a GUI to tapping on a piece of glass with one finger, then double tapping, then swiping and flicking and pinching and spreading, a new interaction model.
Interesting.
We've created a new interaction model
For
your eyes that allow you to do anything simply, anything you could do with one finger on a piece of glass on a smartphone, you can do with your eyes, but faster, with no waiting, no winking, and no dwelling.
That's awesome.
So in that vein, like, if you weren't here, I'd be talking about eye tracking, so I'm glad you're here.
Great.
but besides eye tracking and any kind of input technology, really, I mean, on the action side, we have the best action device ever. A button press is best action device there is. But always we need a context for that action. And usually there's a lot of, in video games you have if I'm here, then this X means talk to this guy. If it's here, then it means jump over this thing, maybe. So the game provides the context. But if the user wants to provide the context, that's when you can use all these other technologies. They can't necessarily do everything by themselves. Using just eyes and sometimes is not the right, but by itself is not the right way to go. But if you can combine it as a context mechanism, or voice as a context mechanism, or brain interface as a context mechanism, I think it works really well. And then together, they also can work. So that's kind of my new way of thinking about these things, is they provide great context for maybe something we're already doing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, in that there have been latency issues with using neural inputs to drive machines. One of the models that I've put into use at my team is that rather than thinking about the neural input as the mouse click, think of it as the shift or control button, right? It changes, it's something that you can do to change the context of a situation. So I think that's kind of where we are right now until we do get that step change, which I think people in this room are going to help us make happen.
So, I mean, and this is my question for you. Having gone through probably thousands of people using this and progressively immersed in a 3D gaming environment, what is the need of the gamers to actually analogically go and do stuff with their hands, grab the object that they throw, or grab the gun, or everything else that they use, versus using a step in between, which is a UI of some form, like a button or something. So at that point, you have a space in 3D. they are there, they are the game, and they want to do stuff that they would do in the physical world. Is that an hypothesis that works in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, definitely people want to have more of an analog input. Than if you just press the button and then a bunch of stuff happens, you start to realize it always happens the same way and you don't have that much say in it. And you want to have it where you can add your own little twist into it and do it kind of the way you wanted to do it. And of course, we still want it amplified always in games. So I want to throw a car, not just throw a pencil. But you know, still I want to throw it the way I want to throw it. So having that extra kind of context of what I mean when I finally press the X button, I think that's what I guess I was trying to get at. And especially in VR, when you do have things nearby you, and AR I guess too, it feels like you should be able to interact with them in a way that's more natural with your hands and things. It's a little bit odd when there's something floating right in front of you to somehow be using an abstract device at that point.
Yeah, this is part of the learning we got from Meta 1, and this is why we want to direct towards hands interaction that are as analog as they can be given the use case.
Interesting.
Actually, when things are further away, I think abstract interfaces make more sense. People don't expect that they can interact with them directly, but yeah, once they're within hand's reach, then it becomes...
Which is a big chunk of, I mean, the brain does a lot of peripersonal operations and has like dedicated mechanisms to deal with things at reach versus things outside of reach. So it's important to leverage on these brain mechanisms because we'll get probably smoother experiences.
Yeah.
The more natural you can make the interactions in a VR space, I think that's what VR is about. It's about immersion. So every time you have to do something that's not natural for a given situation, you break that illusion that you're doing something else, right?
Yeah.
You're not in a. That's why it's virtual reality, right?
Right. Great discussion going on here. I'm going to turn the table a little bit, and I want to focus a little bit on on use cases, right? That could be interesting for the audience here. Specifically, I think for a couple of you who are in the medical area, neuroscience. In fact, you know, when you talk about eye tracking, the obvious case in my mind is, you know, patients with paralysis and how you can control menus with it, of course. Maybe I'll start with you, right, as Stefano, right? Clearly, there is also, I believe, for Meta an angle in the healthcare vertical, right, in neuroscience vertical, right, with your background.
There is a big angle in that. And as a matter of fact, of a very relevance to this conference and to the organizers, at the TED Talk that you can see even in our website, metavision.com, you will see that our CEO at some point shows the glass brain by, the very glass brain by Adam Gazzoli as an important use case through which like a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon can get into the brain and expand it, enter to like the details of the brain up to the synaptic level if they wish to, and if the model is that fine, just by entering into it. That provides like an important window use case towards a lot of like radiology and medical decisions. We have an important use case with Meta 1 of an equipe in the Netherlands. I cannot disclose many details of that, but a surgeon performed a craniofacial, very detailed surgery operation on a real patient using the Meta 1 throughout the operation.
I mean, like
and by
literally
overimposing the 3D scans of the every type of medical image layered in different ways and represented in different ways for supporting different moments of the operation throughout the operation. And these doctors claimed a huge improvement of their performance in the surgery. And that was Meta 1. That was probably an order of magnitude as supportive of those use cases we are now with Meta 2, right? So that is an incredible set of applications for radiology accessing, performing surgery, visualizing and confronting like medical data and doing medical decisions with a big reduction of cost because there is a big cost. It's a multi-billion cost just for the US health system, all the radiology and the medical decision science around that would improve just because they would utilize an accurate 3D representation that is scalable up to the resolution limits of the machine that provides the data.
Wow.
And so medical education,
Yes.
we have big use cases in medical education that it would be too long to talk about it here.
Yeah.
But there is a Stanford startup that worked on Meta 1 to revolutionize ER training in the Stanford students and the students around the world.
How would they train them on
They
VR?
just substitute the dummies that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they can simulate just one or two set of symptoms with full-scale AR patients that have sensitive touch points in different parts of the body according to the specific condition that they simulate. And they can train the student just by doing that and also collecting the data on the student on how reactive and how accurate they are on that specific patient with that specific condition.
Yeah.
And this is feasible on a real scale.
So it's like a real surgeon simulator, right? Sort of.
It's a surgeon and ER condition simulator.
Yes,
full
interesting.
size, full scale. And not only you train the student,
Yes.
but you collect the data on how the student compares and benchmarks to the other students.
I see.
And that is huge for the whole, it saves life.
Yes, yes. Shane, maybe I'll have you just
Sure.
by relevancy, right?
Sure. So one of our products is called MindMotion Pro. It incorporates fingerless, markerless finger tracking, pass-through AR for rehabilitation of stroke. Where we think there's an opportunity is taking these capital equipment, things that require a scheduled visit and technicians to a hospital or facility, and be able to miniaturize it and bring it into the home. You know, we think there are any number of ways that we can create outcomes that are more frequent, that are more accessible, and begin to move some of these types of healthcare into the home.
The home, right? Interesting. What about Jim? I'm actually quite interested in hearing, after you've described the technology, you know, what's in your mind some of the major use cases when it comes to healthcare or human performance or whatnot, right? You know.
I think, let me describe a few demos that I could do, that we do frequently. I have a pair of ODG glasses, so augmented reality glasses. And I might put them on, at which point I might look at a menu, select a menu item, and find out the weather. And with my eyes, I'll instantly move from there and find some travel time to go to Hawaii. Might look at a photo album, look through some photos, pull them up, zoom into them, move through that app, and then pull up an app where we look at I'm a hands-free doctor, and I have patients coming in, and I look at a patient, I look at his charts, I pull this up with my eyes as faster than I'm speaking right now, and then I validate, because it's confidential information, the camera looks at my eyes, validates it at me by looking at my iris, and instantly I have access to it in 100 milliseconds or so, because that's better identified in my fingerprint. So from there, I might move to an app that is a checklist. So now I'm an energy worker on an oil rig, and I need to have my hands free because the current method of procedural adherence on an oil rig is to use a magic marker with a piece of paper on a clipboard. That's the method. That's what's used today.
Wow.
And so put this on, and suddenly I'm looking through my checklist, picking an item, marking it done, moving to an input item where I need to put numbers in. Now I have to enter numbers. Well, so I look at the numbers and I put them in as fast as I can look. Yeah. And right now, which just I'll segue from there, input is fascinating. People always say, how fast can you type with your eyes? Typing with your eyes is a bit of an oxymoron. It's just, it's kind of anachronistic. What you want to do is communicate with your eyes. Well, you can start by typing with your eyes, but now you're going to be typing at roughly a letter every half second, which means you get to maybe 20 words a minute. And if you're disabled, 20 words a minute is a lifeline for you. Most people that are disabled that type by dwelling are doing 15 words a minute. We're looking at ways right now between 40 and 60 words a minute.
By typing with your eyes.
I'll just say by using your eyes and an eye interaction model to make this happen. And people speak about 120 to 150 words a minute, and we're looking at ways to get there because we want you to communicate in that manner. We're working right now on a demo that's just fascinating. I believe it's the first time that AR and VR have been combined.
Yes.
We're doing an AR-VO combo demo that'll be shown in Amsterdam in a couple weeks. And this takes an AR headset for someone in a security environment. Because now what I have is in my headset, I might have, instead of one screen or two screens like a software engineer has, or 6 like a trader has in Bloomberg, I might have a wall of screens, 10 or 20 screens simultaneously that I can look at as fast as I can move my eyes. These screens now carry real-time video streaming from a body cam on a police officer, or an AR pair of glasses streaming not only the camera showing where the head is turned, but their gaze showing where they're looking. So I, as the controller, can sit there. I can look at the body cam from one officer. I see another officer's view through his eyes. I see where he's looking. With my eyes, I indicate, I open a radio channel. I'm talking to him. And now I'm talking to him saying, look here, look at this guy. I don't have to describe it. My gaze is shipped to him on his AR headset. He sees my gaze. At the same time, I see his gaze and my headset. We can see where each other's looking, and we're moving around at an efficiency that's unlike anything that's been done before.
Wow.
And further, one piece of that is, once you begin to put information in front of someone with multiple screens that they can move between and activate, scroll, pan, zoom, launch into websites, as fast as you can look, I think we hit something, it's been brought up a couple times. There's a discontinuity potentially in the way we think, the way we solve problems. And it's very simple, because Adam was speaking about this before. What happens cognitively, when you can process information in literally, move your eyes, which is roughly tens of milliseconds for typical saccade, a motion between points, you can perceive information at that point. You can grab something of interest, move it to a spot with your eyes as fast as you can look. You can build up a mental model of what you're doing. You approach not only limits in short-term memory, but working memory, and possibly can maintain more information in your mind at the same time by creating composite of what you're thinking. At which point, if we could do that, imagine I could put you in a headset, and I could increase your IQ by 20 points.
Wow.
By simply allowing you to be able to access, process information more rapidly. That becomes a discontinuity, and it's all about context as well, because you want the right tools to get you there at the right time, but suddenly, you know, the issues of medical applications, being able to look at a heart through an AR pair of glasses and see what the rate of blood flow through the heart is, or lie under an airplane and make sure when your hands are busy that you can see what part you're supposed to check and validate that with a remote person, or on a phone pole, talk to somebody that can tell you, wait a second, when your hands are tied up, here's what you should be checking on. All those applications are coming for the 40 million hands-free deskless workers in this country, but when you can push this forward and affect our thought, our learning rate, and our emotional interrelationships.
Wow.
And you can do that because, again, we can manage to let you communicate as fast as you can look and think, then great things happen.
That's awesome. It's life at the speed of your eye movement, right? You know?
Yes.
I think couch potatoes would love it, though. Just sit there and, like, order pizzas with it, you know? Sorry. So, Richard, what about you? I mean, obviously, you look at various sorts of, you know, user experience and whatnot, and of course, you know, PlayStation at its core, it's an entertainment company, right? You know, what's your angle to sort of all of these human performance, healthcare, learning, well-being? How do you see things, and what gets you excited about it? You know.
Well, so since I've been at PlayStation, we've looked over the years at ways that the technology that we have can move out of the entertainment space that we're in, and maybe a new business group could use it. And we've had experiments in that direction. And of course, Sony in general has done a lot of that. There's some very consumer-focused products, but they also make very professional-focused products.
Yes.
And so always we're looking to see when it would make sense. And VR in particular seems like one where there's such a big energy in all these other spaces. So I think it's a very interesting area for us to look at. No matter what, our company is always helping to create you know, a mass market for these things so that the prices get driven down and the quality of things gets up. So no matter what, I think we always impact things that way.
Yes.
Game technology is permeated out through many, many different industries now.
Interesting.
Just because of that.
So you're saying is there's a possible future PlayStation Human Performance Edition?
But it might not exactly show up in that form, but I mean, it could be that it transitions from there.
Yeah.
And then even in the entertainment side, actually, there's a bunch of interesting things that are happening now with like sports, for example. You know, a lot of professional sports people are starting to look at how they can use AR and VR technologies for training and not only training, which is one big area, but then also sharing the experience that a professional athlete might have with more of a wider audience.
Yeah.
So I've seen some great things where they, you know, if you were to stand in the batter's box and face some famous pitcher, what would that feel like? And giving you exactly the feeling. And they even take, you know, video or kind of voxelized video of a player and put that person. So it is the real guy. And of course the ball is not the real ball, but it's a video of the real guy. And so mixing reality together that way to get you, so you feel like some of it's real and some of it's virtual.
Yeah.
I think there's really great ways some of that's happening.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this crossover between the actual performance side, which is on the professional athlete side, and then the mass adoption, consuming that.
Yeah, interesting. You're nodding, right? I'm just, Do you have
in this
anything
last use case, it's very important to mention, there is the entertainment part of being on somebody else's experience, but there's also the important like remote collaboration aspect of it.
Yeah.
Imagine that I can share, let's stay to the surgeon, but there's thousands of other use cases in the enterprise in general, in which you may have the world expert, leading expert on that specific problem.
Yeah.
To stay on your task in that given moment. So he lives your experience and drives you through that experience for allowing enormous like training experience, but also task efficiency.
Yeah.
That again may solve important use cases.
Yeah, okay,
in
interesting.
augmented reality.
And Brandon,
Yeah, you know,
sorry,
one of the
yeah.
more interesting things that I saw recently or came to mind recently is content creators who are trying to communicate emotion. So create empathy for situations where you might not have a lot of empathy for. So Verse did a great job with the United Nations and Samsung where we all teamed together to create a VR piece around what it's like to be in Syria as a 12-year-old girl, right? And you see that on TV a lot. You read about it, but it's a totally different kind of experience to be immersed in that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great way to communicate emotion, communicate empathy, communicate happiness, communicate joy. You know, there's lots of things that I think around that's really interesting. Like, how do you communicate emotion in a much more immersive, in a complete kind of way than you're able to do with a 2D image?
Terrific. I'm looking at time here. Just want to wrap up with a final question. Maybe I'll start with even you, Brian. Just around sort of partnership ecosystem and what you invest in, right? I'd love to hear from each of you, like sort of what kind of partner are you looking for, right? And in general, right? Who do you want to work with? And you know, maybe some of the folks here at the audience would be relevant for you to talk to, right, going forward as well. So maybe we'll start with you, Brian. I mean, what's your angle?
Yeah, so I think for Samsung, we're interested in lifting all the boats in the ecosystem, right? So we want to contribute in whatever way we can, certainly on the hardware side to make advances in hardware. We talked a lot about the deficiencies in hardware today, and we're working on all those deficiencies and trying to push that hardware piece forward. But we're also on the content side because you can't have an ecosystem with just hardware. You need content partners, and so we're very much interested in investing in content and content players so that we can produce compelling content that's in gaming, but in education, in healthcare, in all these different verticals that we've talked about today. And so really thinking about not just one piece of the ecosystem, but the entire ecosystem. How can we contribute to the entire ecosystem? That's been our focus.
Sure. Start with you.
MindMaze and Neuro.io are very interested in meeting folks that are at that convergence of neural and immersive technology. So biosensor folks, people that are working on different unique experiences that will drive this together. And to wrap all that together, we're definitely bullish on social VR. We've talked about empathy and emotions, and that's kind of hard to do that alone. So I like to call this the and now what moment. So Christmas this year, Christmas next year, people are going to be having their Vives and their Oculus Rifts at the house. It's going to be great. They're going to show their mom, sister, dog, whatever. And now what? Right? Same thing with the last generation, say, of consumer neural, which happened around 2006 or 7, right? You put it on, you play with it, you raise the ping pong ball, and now what? Right? So how do we cross that chasm and create experiences that are sustained? And a lot of that does have to do with adding the social and empathetic experience with it. I'm a big science fiction fan. Maybe a few people here have read the book Ready Player One, right?
Yeah.
So Ready Player One, kind of the book for modern VR, is not so much about shooting aliens and blowing up spaceships and throwing fireballs as a wizard. Well, there's a lot of that. But it's actually about falling in love in VR, right? So if we're able to get to that, the and now what question is going to be answered pretty easily.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Yes. Jim.
Yeah, we have interest in relationships with a number of partners. We're kind of at the center of this ecosystem because we touch Well, first of all, partners in finance. So Intel Capital did our first Series A round, then Motorola Solutions led our Series B. Jazz Ventures here is an investor, Dolby Ventures as well. So now we're looking at sound, we're looking at sound and sight, we're looking at wearables, we're looking at personal safety. Then we look at display companies. We're always interested in breakthrough display. We talk to most of the companies that have really advanced display technology. We look at other forms of input because, as Richard said, this is multimodal. I've been describing eyes alone, but it clearly is eyes with head, with hands, with voice. You know, one of the things we do is you can look at something and buy it with your eyes, which is interesting. You can send an email message by talking and editing. So that's another piece. And finally, then it's application space. So as we look at we meet with companies, large Fortune 50 companies that are interested in deploying AR and VR. And we also meet with small companies that have a clever idea or a new approach to thinking about interaction, of which social for us, obviously with your eyes, and eye and gaze interaction, mutual gaze is huge. So a pretty broad range that we're interested. Our booth is out here today.
Very, very interesting. So instead of one-click purchase, we'll have a love at first sight purchase, you know? Look at it and the product will come.
Looking by, we call it the world is your store.
Interesting. Richard, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, PlayStation's interested in a wide range of things, but as I mentioned before, my group really looks a lot at component technologies and tries to understand how those component technologies matters to our company and what experiences those component technologies might enable. So that's one of the big things we would be doing here is looking at new component technologies and trying to understand how that might matter to our company.
Yeah. Can you speak for Ro a little bit as well to describe like whether like any B2B or other sort of vertical opportunities for PlayStation would you be interested?
Yeah, so we have a business group that's been looking at all the different opportunities for bringing the hardware that we already have and the kind of software layers that we already have and how that could go into other marketplaces. Yeah. And so it's still kind of very exploratory right now, but there are lots of opportunities, I think, for it. A lot of location-based opportunities for VR immediately are happening already.
Yes.
And whether we fit in or not, we're looking at that.
Yeah.
I mean, PlayStation has a lot of advantages because it's like a very turnkey solution.
Yes.
And it's very robust. So
yes.
A lot of people in installations are interested in those.
Yes. So
they're less expensive potentially.
Exactly. So what you're saying is, you know, beyond just regular game creators and whatnot, you're also looking at bringing some of the other application layers and other, you know, developers on board, right?
We're exploring that space. Yeah. I don't want to be too too bullish, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Terrific. I like that subdued tone. What about Stefano?
Having had a product in the wild from like $1 billion enterprises to individual independent developers for 2 years, we developed an idea of the market that, of course, has a lot of enterprise use case, enterprise manufacturing, healthcare, education and training, all these use cases. But we also know that there is a huge community of independent content creators, developers that want to develop killer apps. They're eager to do that. And that will be fundamental for the latest like mass adoption. But also, like we just completed we're in the middle, actually, of a research project that we're partnering with Accenture Technology Lab, where we're trying to exactly understand what use case our technology can support to cost reduction, performance improvement in a lot of important industry verticals in these spaces. And for doing that, we went on the wild of the Bay to Breakers Expo on a booth there. And we tested a lot of random people. And those reactions that you were mentioning about, the people from the street, people who don't have any previous exposure even to these technologies, once they break the wall, because some of them say no, but once they break the wall and try it, they get mind blown by the experience, and they start proposing a lot of interesting use cases. We did that for proven use cases that I cannot share here, but also the reaction of the masses is unbelievable, and it's probably promising that if we catch up with the right technology soon, the mass adoption will come sooner than the latest projections are forecasting.
Interesting.
Yeah, Jason, one quick note. We're under NDAs with many of this class of partner big players, but of course, we work with HMD manufacturers.
Yes.
Fundamentally.
Yes.
And I just can't name
Of course.
name them here.
Of course. Terrific. Anything to add? I mean, very, very great discussion here. Obviously, VR, AR, MR is here to stay. A lot of new technology on the horizon that could improve the user experience. bringing more new use cases. We've heard a lot of exciting use cases here already. So, so I think I want to thank you for the time. I think we're right on time, sort of. And maybe we can give them a round of applause for being here.